Let me start off by saying that as I write this, it's late at night. I just got off working a long night, and I've had a couple of drinks, so I'm ready to relate the creepiest story that's ever happened to me to the best of my ability. A few years ago, I don't remember how many now, let's just say I was in my early 20s, so that would put this story between 2008 and 2010. I was out camping with some friends in the Charles C. Dean Wilderness in the Hoosier National Forest. The main road in the wilderness is named Tower Ridge Road, after the tall Hickory Ridge fire tower that is smack dab in the middle of the woods. When you pull off the road into the parking area for the tower, there is an old disused gravel road that leads to a few trails out in the wilderness. At the very end of the road is a very old cemetery. A lot of the headstones are simple sandstone markers indicating that someone is buried there. If there was any information on them to begin with, it had long since eroded away. The areas that made up the wilderness was created when the government repossessed farmers' land during the Great Depression. Before that, the area was farmed for quite a while. So naturally, the poor subsistence farming people that lived and farmed the area needed a place to bury their loved ones. Most of the graves in the cemetery were very old, and all of their immediate relatives had long since passed away themselves. However, there were a few granite headstones from as early as the mid-1990s, and a few from wealthier former residents who were able to afford professionally carved headstones, dating from the early 20th century. I was camping in a convenient area with close proximity to our vehicle, and the gravel road to make our camping trip all the more comfortable. The only downside to having all of these conveniences was that we had to be near the main trail, so we had a fair amount of foot traffic going by our tents. My friends and I were friendly to everybody passing by, exchanging pleasantries and wishing people a good hike. Quite a while after dark had settled in, when we had our fire roaring and we were all in good spirits after having some drinks and smoking some weed, a person of average build and weight passed our camp, wearing a headlamp with the creepy red filter on so we couldn't see his face, and he was carrying a spade with a D-grip. We said hello like we had to everybody that passed our camp. But this person was different. This person just passed on by without breaking his stride or even saying a word to us. He just acted like we weren't even there. We all thought it was weird, but nobody said anything to each other about it, and we soon forgot about our encounter with the weird shovel-wielding man. The next morning, I awoke to a beautiful blue sky. The birds were singing, and it was shaping up to be a truly beautiful day. I woke up before my compatriots, which wasn't unusual for me because I'm always the first one up in the morning on camping trips. I usually get coffee ready and wake everybody up with the sounds and smells of coffee being made. On this particular trip, being a bunch of 20-year-olds, we remembered the booze and weed, but of course forgot the coffee. After standing around for a while and not wanting to wake my friends up, I decided to take the mile or so hike down the disused gravel road and check out the cemetery. I left without telling anyone where I was going. After all, it was a beautiful day. Not too hot, not too cold, and the sun was shining. What could possibly go wrong, right? I had soon made the mile or so trek down the gravel road, enjoying the sights and smells of the forest, and I had quickly found the cemetery. It was surrounded by a high-waist chain-link fence with a gate in it. I opened the gate and stepped inside the cemetery and began looking at all the graves. Near the entrance to the cemetery, there were a few professionally carved limestone headstones. As I approached the closest one, to my horror, I saw that the grave had been disturbed. There was an approximately 5-foot hole dug near the headstone with the same D-grip shovel in the bottom of the hole, which was located in the approximate location where the person would have been buried. The hole even had 3 terrace-like steps dug into it so the grave robber could easily get out of their own hole when they were done doing their dastardly deed. I inspected the headstone as best as I could under the circumstances. It was limestone and very old, so a lot of the information had long since eroded away. However, I'm fairly certain that the graves belonged to what I think is an infant girl named Elizabeth, who died shortly after her birth in the early 20th century. After my brief inspection, the notion dawned on me that there was only one way in and out of the cemetery, and I hadn't passed anyone on my way in. I wasn't even trying to be stealthy in my approach, and I soon realized that the person who dug the hole probably heard me coming and was still probably in the immediate area. All of a sudden, I had the feeling that I was being watched from someone in the surrounding forest, and needless to say, I felt very unnerved by the whole situation. I looked around, but I saw nothing but endless forest on either side of me. I decided to beat a hasty retreat from the area. After I got out of eyeshot from the cemetery, I walked as fast as I could back to the relative safety of our camp. A little while after I got back to camp, my friends started waking up, and naturally, I relayed what had just happened to them. They were just freaked out by the whole situation as I was. After some discussion, we decided to leave. After we had packed up camp and were about to leave the parking area, We noticed that there was a sign on the gate of the gravel road going to the cemetery, indicating a number for whoever managed the cemetery. Of course, we called the number, and I relayed my story to whoever was on the other end. A few hours after this, I received a call from the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office asking for my story. They said they would send an officer to check out the cemetery. Needless to say, I never heard back from them. But I sure as heck hope that I never run into the D-handled shovel-wielding weirdo who would dig up an infant's grave in the middle of the night. I have no idea what this guy could have been after. The area where the cemetery is located is very remote today, and back in the early 20th century, it would have been even more remote. I would imagine that most people would have just been buried in a simple homemade unsealed wooden coffin with no embalming. They probably would have just had the local priest over to say a few words, and that would have been that. Later on, they probably paid to have a nice headstone made on this particular grave for their precious daughter. I have been back to this particular area of the woods many times since then. I have even been back to the cemetery in the years since this incident. You can no longer tell that a grave had ever been disturbed. I'm pretty sure I know which one it was, but it's hard to be 100% sure. I've never had another experience that even comes close to this one. A lot of the graves had sunken in due to time, causing the caskets to collapse, further confusing which grave it could have been. All I can hope for is that poor Elizabeth is able to spend the rest of eternity in peace. Okay, so here we go. In early 2014, I was 18 years old and started browsing the world of Craigslist. I responded to an ad in the personal section and started texting this woman. Now being 18 and unfamiliar with how Craigslist worked, I didn't see an issue with her meeting up at a red roof. I also didn't see anything wrong with her asking for donations. Again, 18 is stupid. I figured donation meant optional. Again, stupid, I know, but just to be clear, she never gave me a price, nor did I tell her I had money for her. So I set up a time to meet her. I left my house to head to my GED class as usual, but walked to Red Roof instead. It was pouring rain and it was warm out, so by the time I got there, I was all drenched and sweaty. I knocked on the room door she was in, and she answered. Her attire should have alerted me, but let's say it again. 18 and stupid. She invited me in and asked to use the shower quickly, so I get undressed in the bathroom and hop in the shower. She started taking off her top, and I told her, "That's okay, I won't be long." So she goes and waits on the bed watching Steve Wilkos. I get out of the shower and wrap a towel around my waist. I came out of the bathroom, Randy as a dog, looked at her and asked if she was ready. She sprawled out on the bed and said, "Donations are due up front." At this point, all the red flags that should have gone off did as I realized the situation I was in. My face dropped as I faced the TV. I nervously told her I didn't have any money. She got up and started screaming at me and threw my clothes and back at me. I got dressed and actually apologized for wasting her time. So, I leave her room and start heading back to my GED class. Before I was out of the parking lot, a guy in a green punch bug called me over to him. I tried to ignore him and walk past until he shouted to get my attention. So I walk up to the driver's side of this guy's car and he starts talking to me. Now this guy looked sketchy and I just figured he was the woman's pimp, so he's talking to me with his left arm up on his door and his right arm down at his side, holding a pistol. At this point, I'm almost certain I'm going to get shot. He says to me, "So why would you come here knowing you don't have any money?" I explained as calmly as I could that I wasn't aware of the situation. This guy pulls his arm up a little bit to show me his gun and say, "I have messages between you and her saying you had money for her." Now, like I said earlier, I never told this woman I had any money. So this guy decides to lower his gun and says to me, "You're lucky you came to one of my girls. Other girls would have stabbed you with a broken crack pipe. I see you're pretty young, so I'll let you off with a warning this time." He then motioned me to be on my way. Bet your ass I kept looking back to make sure I wasn't about to be shot from behind. I was 11 the first time I saw him. I had just gotten out of school and I remember being hot and tired but still excited because I had chore money in my backpack. $8 and some change, crumpled into my bag next to a mechanical pencil I found on the floor. That high quality stuff. That was enough for a Happy Meal. Nuggets, fries, a little toy I'd pretend I didn't care about, and a Sprite. Heaven on earth to me. The McDonald's was only a few blocks from the school and up the hill from my apartment. My mom wasn't crazy about me walking around alone, but she also worked 2 jobs and couldn't pick me up most days. If I got home before 5 and didn't talk to strangers, she didn't ask too many questions. I kept my phone on 50% brightness to save battery. pretended like I was grown, and slid my earbuds in like I had somewhere important to go. That McDonald's became my little kingdom. Booth by the window, shoes kicked off under the table, watching YouTube Vaughn compilations on my cracked phone while sipping a Sprite like it was champagne. I had just discovered Tumblr that year. I was reposting Melanie Martinez fan edits and thinking I understood what the word aesthetic meant. I was 11 going on 20, or at least I thought I was. That's probably why I didn't think it was weird when he sat near me. He didn't work there. I knew that much. He was too old to be hanging around during school hours and didn't have on a uniform. But the first time, I assumed he was waiting for someone. He had on this navy hoodie, sleeves pushed up, and a raggedy backpack next to him like he also just got out of school. He looked maybe 17, 18 at the oldest, with a face like he just started growing into it. Tall white boy, deep voice. He looked like one of those SoundCloud emo rapper dudes. "You draw?" he asked, nodding at my sketchbook. I shrugged, trying to act unbothered. "Kinda," I said. "Not like for real. You got talent," he said, and I felt my chest puff up just a little bit because nobody ever said stuff like that to me, especially not older boys. At school, most of the dudes my age were busy with whatever the popular trends were back then. This one, he looked me in the eye when he talked and made me feel seen. The next time he was already there. Same booth and same backpack. Same easy smile when I walked in. "You again," he said. "You following me or something?" I laughed a little too loud. He always knew what to say to make me feel grown up. He'd ask about school and my drawings or music. Then he started asking about other stuff, like what my background was, what kind of guys I liked. And then he said I didn't talk like the other black girls he knew, whatever that meant. I didn't even know how to respond to that. But still, I came back, week after week, sometimes twice a week if I had extra change, and he was always there, like it was planned. The first few weeks, the conversations felt like a secret game. He'd show up at McDonald's like clockwork, sometimes early afternoon, sometimes after school. And we'd talk about everything, but what I was really thinking about. I liked how he made me feel special. Like I was this rare thing. Not just a kid with a Happy Meal and a sketchbook, but somebody worth paying attention to. When he asked me for my number, I thought, this is it. I'm officially grown. I still remember the moment I handed him my phone, watching him punch in the digits. It felt thrilling, like I was stepping into a world I wasn't supposed to know about yet. My fingers brushed the screen and hesitated for a second, and then I pressed send on the first text I ever wrote to him. "Hey, it's me." His reply came almost immediately. "You're cute. You're always going to be my favorite artist." That first text stayed with me for days. I showed it to my best friend like it was a badge of honor. "He thinks I'm cool," I told her, my voice a little higher than usual. "He really listens." She shrugged and told me to be careful, but I didn't want to hear about that. Middle school kids always try to act like they're grown anyway. Everybody's pretending. I was just pretending better. Sometimes he'd ask me stuff that felt off, but he always said it like it was a joke, so I played along. Like out of nowhere, he'd be like, "Do you say the N-word? Be real." Or, "What would you do if somebody called you that at school?" And then one day he asked, "So, can I get an N-word pass? You're cool like that, right?" I remember laughing, but not because it was funny, more like I didn't know what else to do. Then he hit me with, "I'll trade you $5 and a Sprite if you are my personal slave for a day." And when I froze a little, he was like, "Chill, I'm joking. Damn, you're sensitive." He'd sometimes try to talk hood around me too, saying stuff like gang or yo or "you trying to wild out?" in this fake deep voice that didn't even sound like him. At the time, I didn't know what the heck he was on, but looking back now, I think he was testing me. The text started innocently. "What are you drawing now? Did you finish your homework? Are you watching the new Stranger Things?" He even sent me links to music playlists he said reminded him of me. But over time, things got a little bit different, a little heavier. He'd ask me stuff that made me pause, questions about myself, or if I'd started changing yet, who I liked, and if I had my first kiss yet. I felt weird but also proud to answer, like I was a grown woman sharing secrets with a friend. Sometimes I'd get texts when I was supposed to be asleep. "Bet you look good in your PJs," or "You're staying up late just thinking about me." I told myself it was a joke, that he was just being funny, and it was part of the game. I was learning the rules. I wanted to be in on it. After all, kids at school were trading stories about boys and crushes like it was some kind of competition. I didn't want to be the only one who'd never been talked to like that. But even then, there were moments where my stomach flipped. When he asked me if I started growing hair yet or sent me a picture of his hand gripping a pillow. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. I didn't want to lose him, and besides, I thought I was grown enough to handle it. Thought I knew what I was doing. Still, I kept going to McDonald's even on days I didn't have any money. Sometimes I'd sit farther away, pretending not to notice him watching me. I told myself I was just being cautious. I told myself I was in control, but the truth is, it was getting harder to breathe when he was around. Like the air was somehow thicker and heavier, and I didn't know how to make it stop. It wasn't like I told my mom about any of it. I knew she wouldn't understand. She was busy with work and bills, and with trying to keep everything together. And I was supposed to be a kid not dealing with this stuff. So I kept it all inside, tucked away under layers of laughs and texts and drawings. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed, of course. The way his smile sometimes didn't reach his eyes, or the way his questions stopped being about me and started being about control. But back then, I was 11, and I thought I was grown, and that was obviously my mistake. I thought blocking his number would end it, but when my mom found the text, she didn't scream or curse like I thought she would. She just stared at me emotionless. Then she said real quietly, "You blocked that boy. Don't answer. Don't go back there ever again. Understand me?" I nodded. She didn't say anything else, just walked out of the room and left me sitting there with my heart pounding and my phone locked in her hand. I told her I'd stop going to McDonald's, and for a while I did. I stayed home after school, watched anime reruns on my tablet, and sketched in silence. My bestie kept texting me to hang out, but I kept saying no. I wanted to be good. I really did. But something about the quiet made me feel itchy. I missed the way he made me feel seen. Like I wasn't just some awkward kid with Velcro sneakers. I missed the attention. Even if the words were weird sometimes, or even if the questions made my stomach twist. So one Friday, when my mom had a double shift, I walked back to the McDonald's. Told myself I wasn't going to talk to him. I'd just sit, eat, and leave. That was it. I had $10 from babysitting my cousin the weekend before. I ordered a Happy Meal, even though I told myself I wasn't a little kid anymore. It just felt safe or familiar. He was already inside. Same hoodie, same old backpack, same smile, but it didn't look soft this time. It looked sharp. He watched me sit down in the booth by the window like he'd been waiting. I thought he'd maybe give me a nod from across the room. Instead, he walked straight over and slid in next to me. Next to me, not across. Right there on the same side. His body pressed against mine. I stiffened, staring at the tray in front of me, my hand shaking a little as I opened the tiny milk jug. "You've been avoiding me," he said, low and flat. I tried to laugh. "Nah, I've just been busy. Homework and stuff." But he didn't laugh back. Instead, his leg pressed harder against mine, and I could feel how much taller and how much bigger he was. He was taking up all the space. I suddenly felt how small my arms were, or how my hoodie sleeve still bunched up at the wrist because I hadn't hit that growth spurt yet. I wasn't grown up, and I wasn't even close. He leaned in, hot-ass breath hitting my face. "I thought you were different," he said. "I thought you could handle grown-up things, but you were just like the rest of them little girls." Scared. My whole body went still. Then without warning, he put his hand on my thigh hard, gripped it tight, his fingers digging in like he was trying to leave a mark. I winced, but I didn't say anything. My whole brain just shut off. He wasn't looking at me anymore, just staring straight ahead, his fingers still pressing into the soft part above my knee. "I thought you were actually mature," he said, almost like he was sad. Guess I was wrong. I don't even remember standing up. I just remember the sound of the tray clattering to the floor, my fries spilling under the table, the little toy bouncing out of the box and rolling near his foot. I didn't stop to grab it. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door like I had somewhere to be, then ran the second my feet hit the sidewalk. I didn't cry until I got home. Didn't tell my mom, and I didn't tell any of my friends. Just went straight to my room, curled up under the blanket, and felt my thigh throbbing, where his fingers had been. After that, I didn't go anywhere but school and home. Even walking past that McDonald's made my stomach twist. That Friday was the last time I tried to act grown. It was the last time I let myself believe I was in control. Looking back now, he saw me alone, and saw how eager I was to be taken seriously, how easy it was to plant compliments like seeds and watch them grow into something he could use. And I gave him room. I let him sit next to me, I laughed when he said creepy things, and I answered texts I didn't know how to read right. But I was 11. I just knew I wanted to feel special, and he knew exactly how to use that. Think about that grip on my thigh more than I like to admit. Not because it hurt, but because it changed something in me. That moment snapped the fantasy clean in half. I wasn't grown up. I was still a little girl in a too big hoodie and a heart too soft to carry the weight he put on it. I remember how fast the fear came rushing in, how fake all the flirting felt after that. I remember the silence afterward. Now that I'm 21, I catch myself watching girls like I used to be, sitting in McDonald's, earbuds in, doodling on napkins, thinking they've got it all figured out, and I want to tell them, "Honey, you don't. that it's not your fault, it's his. The older boy who keeps showing up where you feel safe. The one who talks to you like you're different. Like you're smarter than everybody else. Like he's doing you a favor just by paying attention. That boy doesn't think you're special, he thinks you're easy to fool. I'm not ashamed of being that little girl anymore. I was soft and bright and curious, and he mistook all of that for permission. But I'm angry for her. I wish somebody had caught me walking into that McDonald's and told me to go home. I wish I had believed my mom the first time. Or I wish I had known that no grown man should ever have been paying that much attention to a kid. At age 12, I started babysitting for family friends who had 3 daughters ages 4 to 7. They lived in a cul-de-sac where nearly every home housed a young couple with children in elementary school. The neighborhood was extremely close-knit, like the 1950s American block party communities. They had a communal policy on using one another's toys. Any kid could use a play structure in someone else's yard anytime without asking. Shortly after I started working in the neighborhood, they revised the rule to anytime a family is not using a babysitter to watch their kids. To ensure I would not get overwhelmed supervising a swarm of kids I wasn't paid to watch. It was thus more or less known when parents were going out and leaving somebody else in charge of their children. I was allowed to take the girls to play in any other yard as they wanted. Their parents even gave me permission to let them play in someone else's yard or sandbox, independently if I needed a short break. Being an avid Babysitter's Club reader, I didn't leave the girls outside unsupervised ever. I would wait until somebody else wanted a water or bathroom break and then crawl everyone inside temporarily. Similarly, when the girls wanted to play in the treehouse, owned by an older couple a few doors up the street, I climbed up, despite a slight fear of heights, and crouched in the little house with them, despite feelings of claustrophobia, to follow my own rule. I don't recall whether my everyone outside together rule preceded the first odd interaction I had with the immediate next door neighbor or not. But when the police questioned the girls I babysat years later, they said nothing bad ever happened when I watched them because I set up that weird, sometimes annoying rule. One day while playing basketball with the girls in the driveway, the next door neighbor came outside in a baseball hat and sunglasses and sat down on his second-story deck to read a paper bag. I later noticed he turned his chair about 180 degrees to face us and the basketball hoop. I couldn't tell if he was looking at us. He had no reaction to me staring at him, just flipping pages in the book like somebody would when reading. This behavior repeated every time we played basketball for the 5 years I watched the girls. Eventually, once I noticed him in the chair, accessories on, I would suggest a game we could play inside or in the front yard but out of view. The strange neighbor was familiar to me as he went to my church. I've never seen someone kneel in a pew, head bowed and hands folded, with the same level of intensity before or since. Once when my family was seated behind him, the priest came over to ask me to lead the children's mass during the homily because the usual person was out sick. This guy turned around and glared at me like I personally set out to interrupt his prayer time. When I worked in the church nursery during various masses, I would often make eye contact with him as he waited in line outside the nursery door to use the restroom. From what I gleaned from our family, friends, and other people in the neighborhood, the odd basketball observer was a nice guy who gave up his apartment and job in the city to move in with and care for the sick, elderly mother. Since everybody thought he was great and since he went to church, this was before the Catholic sex scandal broke, I figured I was in the wrong for finding him creepy. Even as young as 12, I was used to guys in their 40s and 50s asking me to go somewhere with them, or driving by slowly as I walked or biked and jogged to make lewd comments. I figured I was projecting those experiences onto this awkward, quiet guy who was not doing anything wrong. For instance, I was certain that if the guy next door were a creep, he would not miss the opportunity to wash his sunglasses on, in book in hand, while the kids and I went swimming each summer when the family opened their above-ground pool. But he never set foot on his deck when the kids and I donned swimsuits to play in the pool or backyard. I was more convinced I was conceited and mean. Then when I was 15 or 16, I caught him looking in the window as I cleaned up after movie night. The girls and I put on a film after bath time, and instead of watching it theater style in total darkness, we kept some lights on so I could braid the girls' hair. The big screen TV we used for movies was located in an addition of the house with floor-to-ceiling windows. Though my parents were OCD about shutting blinds and curtains when the sun went down to prevent people from seeing in, our family friends had no window treatments on the big modern windows. When I turned off the last light in the room, a floor lamp right next to a window facing the neighbor's house, I could see into the darkness outside where the weird man sat on his deck in a chair in line with the window that I was looking through. I looked over my shoulder and realized he had a line of sight on where the girls and I sat on the floor during the movie. As I looked back towards the house, I glimpsed him hustling inside. I would have doubted I'd seen him at all if he had not left the chair in such an unusual spot. After watching him turn the chair around to read during many a basketball match, I knew where the chair sat that night facing the window into the family room was not the chair's usual position on the deck. After that incident, I would suggest playing board games in another room or insist on watching movies theater style to ensure he could not peep on what we did at night. Once the girls were asleep, I avoided the family room entirely because I was paranoid about being watched. If I weren't in the kitchen doing homework or reading, away from all the windows, I'd walk around the original first floor footprint of the house where all the windows had curtains. The first time the parents noticed my change in routine, they insisted I could watch TV or movies in the family room. I didn't mention anything to them because I was worried my concerns were silly and conceited. When I was 17, my family heard an evening cable news story about a man in our town caught in a police sting operation in which a woman pretended to prostitute her 2-year-old. When they raided his house, the police found a ton of inappropriate content on his computer. Our family friends called a couple weeks later. They wanted to know how I knew the young man next door to them was not safe. He was the guy I'd heard about on TV. As they described it, the police found his blog where he wrote about his obsession with one of the girls who lived next door to him. He detailed his fantasies involving her and his plans to act on them. Things like lying in the treehouse for hours, hoping to corner her when she climbed up alone to play. Many of his entries focus on taking advantage of or kidnapping the girl while the babysitter was in charge. In his head, babysitters were like the ones in old movies, talking to friends on the phone or making out with the boy they invited over instead of caring for the children. As it became clear I did neither one of those things, his plans evolved to killing the babysitter, taking the girl, and getting out of Dodge City. After talking to the girls to ensure they were not victims, the police suggested I might know something to have acted the way I did. All the pieces, the frequent run-ins at the church when I had children in my care, or the weird things he did when he knew I was watching the kids next door, all fit together cohesively. I was relieved I was not mean-spirited or imagining things. I was perhaps conceited. The focus was not on me, but on the children. But I was not crazy. Was driving out of Nowheresville for spring break at 1 to 3 a.m. with a best friend named Jeb, and had to stop for utilities just off the highway. Let's just say that this stop was far away from any type of civilization, which I'll get to. The gas station was closed. We decided to go in the bushes. For context, it was in the middle of a severe thunderstorm. It felt like driving through a constant car wash. As we are relieving ourselves, Jeb, hey, can you see that giant rock poking through the woods on that hill? Me, yeah, I can, just barely though. Look on top of it, he said. There was a barely visible outline of a person standing on top of the rock. You could tell they were trying their best to stand perfectly still, yet also having a staring contest with us. It was very clear that they weren't wearing any sort of attire for the rain. Of course, we sprinted back to the car. Jeb, I think it was a girl, but it's so hard to see in this rain. Me, a car beats some rando without a car 9 times out of 10, so let's find out. We pull out and were able to angle the car so that the brights could point at the rock. We knew it made little difference in the storm, but tried anyways. The lights barely revealed 2 grown men working together to both drag something large and appeared to be digging behind the rock from our view. Both were in completely blacked out clothing. We could tell they were definitely okay with getting soaked. What sent chills down our spines, though, other than seeing the one originally, was that for the split second they looked back at our lights, both were wearing what appeared to be Halloween masks, or at least something covering their faces that looked like it could have been dark painted hockey masks, before they were able to drag the large trash bag looking thing fully behind the rock. Words could not describe how fast I got back onto that highway. There were no other cars in the area, and we could tell that the woods were isolated to just a patch beside the highway. I grew up in Central Texas. This happened at a large lake in South Texas when I was around 20 years old. My family owns a very small fishing cabin on this lake. The cabin was very secluded. A group of about 5 other friends and I had taken to hanging out at the cabin pretty often. The entire lake was very large, 30 square miles, 2,000 surface acres. But our cabin was on the arm of the lake. The water was about 1,500 feet wide from one side to the other in this arm. We also had a pier that jutted out, about 100 feet. One morning, I was up very early by myself. I noticed some movement on the other side of the lake. I had binoculars with me and gave them a look. It was a doe and her fawn foraging. But what was that at their feet? They were standing in a patch of mushrooms. A friend had just given me a dose of magic mushrooms a couple months prior for my birthday. It was an amazing experience. There was cattle that grazed across the lake, so I figured it was a possibility these may be magic as well. For those that don't know, these particular fungi grow on cow poop. So long story short, I paddled over in a kayak, picked a few, took them back home, and researched them. And when I was more than reasonably sure that they were the type I wanted, or at least not poisonous, I tried them. Stupid I know, of course. I thoroughly cut, cleaned, washed, and disinfected them first. They were the real deal. Soon enough, we were making regular trips to pick shrooms. Eventually, we had so many we started selling them to others. Just friends, really. People that we trusted. Eventually, we were going up every Friday and picking, partying for the weekend, and heading home Sunday evening. We were making great money and having a lot of fun doing it. By the way, I'm not trying to glamorize such activity, and actually, such a lifestyle ended up having big consequences in the end. A story in itself, but we were young and dumb at the time. As the time went by and nothing bad happened, we began feeling safer and safer and taking fewer precautions. I should say that this was several years ago and very few people had cell phones. Neither I nor any of my friends owned one, and even if we had, we most likely would not have had reception out there in those days. A guy we had been selling to wanted a large amount, talking about a couple pounds dried. So we got in the kayaks and paddled across one night. Started hunting. It was so-so picking. A little bit dry, so not nearly as many as we sometimes found. In order to fill our order request, we're going to have to go to a new territory. I'll explain. From our pier where we launched the kayaks to the left, our arm of the lake continued down about another mile, where it eventually became more of a creek. To the right, it jutted out to a peninsula about a half-mile long, then circled back around in a cove where you could no longer see it, and then opened up to the main lake. The beach was clear for about 200 feet, and then it was very thick woods. We cut across the peninsula to get to that beach that was hidden by it. In all the months we had been hunting, we had never seen anyone on land, just the occasional fishing boat heading out or coming in. We had been looking on the hidden beach for about 40 minutes, when my eye caught a reflection from the light in the woods to my left. "You see that?" I said to my friend. "Yeah, what is it?" We walked into the woods to find two beat up and severely dilapidated school buses. They looked like they had been there since Jesus' day, and the woods had sort of just grown in around them. Somebody had made a poor attempt to try to camouflage them with spray paint. I had caught sight of a piece of the reflective tape, surprisingly still a little bit reflective. My heart was racing and I was on high alert, but I was also very curious. We walked over and started trying to peer in the windows, but we couldn't see much because of all the tree sap obscuring our view. About that time, my heart leapt out of my chest as what sounded like a muffled chainsaw started up very near the second school bus. But soon enough, we figured out that it was just a small diesel generator inside a Rubbermaid container, buried in the ground, that had automatically kicked on. Still, that was enough to convince us that this place was occupied or at least maintained. We composed ourselves, laughed a little bit, and decided to leave. We got back to the beach, cut across the small peninsula, and headed for the cluster of reeds where we had stashed our boats. "Hey man, where's our boat?" my friend asked. I became panic-stricken. He saw another patch of reeds down the beach and he seemed relieved, thinking that maybe that was where we left the boats. But I have a famously impeccable sense of direction and knew that this was the patch. He seemed to fully believe that we would find our boats at the next patch. Just to humor him, and just in case my spidey sense was off tonight, we headed for the next patch 150 feet away, with no boats. Now my friend was freaking as well. Then we heard a disembodied voice coming from the tree line. "I assume you mother effers are here to rob me?" We looked to see a guy, mid-40s, 6 feet tall, probably 180 pounds, dressed in army fatigues. He too was holding a machete and had a shoulder holster meant for a large revolver on, although there was no gun in it. "What the heck are y'all up to? You stealing stuff from us?" The younger guy questioned while snatching our bag of mushrooms off the ground where we had dropped them in fear. No, we're looking for food," I replied. "That's bullcrap, man. You know it. Them are cow shit shrooms." He didn't buy the food line. "We should call the sheriff, but we don't need any pigs rooting here," the young one said. "We'll just deal with it on our own. I guess you realized your boats are out to sea." They both laughed. They had pushed our boats into the lake, and the current had carried them away so that all you could see was a distant white dot. We were both terrified and they knew it. For the first time, I could smell whiskey on both of their breaths. My friend was getting desperate. Money. We can give you money, just let us go, and we'll bring you some cash as soon as we get rid of these," he proposed. They laughed again. The other one started talking. "We don't care about money. We take fine care of ourselves. We really don't like you drawing attention to our humble home here," referring to the houses that were the buses. I think there were squatters, maybe more. "Tell you what, if one of y'all can swim out and get both of these boats and bring them back, then we'll let y'all be on your way, as long as you never come back. If you don't think you can do it, we'll have to decide where to go from there." I asked my friend what he wanted to do. He decided I would swim for it and bring back both boats or die trying. That meant my friend would be left alone with the two of them, and we weren't sure if they would hold up the bargain. I started swimming for it. My arms and legs were on fire, and my lungs were tensing to provide enough oxygen. Finally, I reached the boat. The paddle was lodged inside, thankfully. I paddled to the other boat and tied off to tow it. About 10 minutes had elapsed. I began the paddle back to the beach, and I finally reached it. The guy told me to get out, and I did reluctantly. I thought they were going to scratch on their end. They told us if they ever caught us out there again, it would not work out too well for us, in no uncertain terms. But they let us get in our boats and paddle away. They threw rocks and taunted us while we were in range. I was half expecting them to wait till we were in deep enough water and start shooting with the missing revolver. Luckily, that never happened. We paddled further down so they couldn't see what cabin we went to, but obviously we never went back. This is my first post here. I'm late to the game. I decided to use a Starbucks gift card I got for Christmas this morning before class. I live in a college town, and I wanted to go to the Starbucks closest to campus so I wouldn't be late. This one doesn't have a nice drive-through window, so I had to walk in. When I walked up to the front door, a man and a woman were sitting at the outdoor table, and they both made eye contact with me. I remember thinking it was a little bit weird because they looked me up and down. Plus, it was like 30 degrees, and there were clearly open chairs inside. Come to think of it, they didn't even have drinks or anything. I walked inside and ordered my drink like normal, but I could still feel them staring at me through the front window. Once I got my drink, I started to walk out to my car, passing the two people. I heard both of them stand up and start walking behind me without saying a word. I got really scared and put my car keys in between my knuckles just in case I needed to protect myself. I sped up and got into my car as fast as I could and locked all the doors. Not even 2 seconds later, the woman knocked aggressively on my driver's side window, essentially making me damn near piss myself. The man was right next to her with a straight face, hands in his pockets, looking through the windows of my car as if he were searching for something he wanted. I cracked the window like a centimeter so she couldn't fit her hand in or anything and asked if she needed anything, and she told me to roll down the window more. I just said it was really cold, so I'm going to keep it up. He then asked me if I could give them some money, and she seemed like she was insisting, not so much asking. I stumbled over my words and told her that I paid with a gift card and that I'm a poor college kid who didn't have cash, which was true, but it sounded like an excuse. The man started to look confused and angry at me, and he yelled at me to get out of the car. That's when I just noped the heck out and drove away as fast as I could. I'm glad I got out of there, but they scared the crap out of me. I probably shouldn't have even talked to them at all. Newbie here. Reading these posts got me thinking of an experience I had about 6 years ago when I was living with my boyfriend at the time in a very small backwoods town in West Virginia. It was 23 miles from the interstate to my house, and there was only one house close enough to be seen from our house. The majority of traffic through our roads was actually trucks carrying fracking wastewater. Yuck, I know, and it was extremely rare to see people out walking around in the area. Like I had never seen it before. So it was a peaceful place, but it could be pretty creepy all on its own. We lived in a single wide trailer next to my boyfriend's boss, his wife, and 3 kids, the neighbor I mentioned previously. We were pretty close with them, and they were actually the reason we moved out to the area. We had spent a substantial amount of time out there before we moved out and had never really had any unsettling experiences. However, it did not take long for that to change. We moved into our house as soon as the previous tenants moved out. My boyfriend's boss said they were into partying. They constantly had people over, etc. We had been living in a total crap hole of a studio apartment, so we were really eager to start our new lives in a legitimate house. The first night we stayed there, I could have sworn I heard someone rummaging around on our back porch. There were a few things still out there from the previous tenants, but I wrote it off as my mind playing tricks on me in this new remote location. However, strange noises continued to occur almost every single night. Rustling behind the house, or thumps and thuds on the front porch. mostly things that could definitely be animals and not people. My boyfriend never seemed to hear them or just chose to actively ignore them, and he reaffirmed my original conclusion that it was all in my head. About a month after we moved in, I woke up to the sound of frantic pounding on my back door. The back door was just outside the door to our bedroom, so it was pretty loud. I laid there, half convinced I was dreaming, for at least a full minute while the pounding continued. At that point I realized, nope, I am completely awake. What the actual heck is going on? I shook and shook my boyfriend, but he was an extremely deep sleeper, so he just kind of made some noises and rolled over. I tried to tell him there's someone on our back porch, but it was like he couldn't even hear it. This continued for probably about 5 minutes before it quit abruptly. I was mortified at this point, physically shaking, and I had been too scared to get up and go look myself. After about 10 minutes, I was convinced that whoever or whatever was out there must be gone, or hopefully. So I got up to look out the back window, and I see nothing. Front window, nothing. No sign that anyone had been there. I was wide awake and figured I would be up for the rest of the night, but being so far from everything with no internet, cable, or phone service, I got bored quickly and climbed back into bed and eventually drifted off. I told my boyfriend about it in the morning, and he agreed that it was pretty creepy and that we should maybe get a camera or something in case it ever happens again. We both went about our days and went over to the neighbor's house to visit with the kids and have dinner. Before I even mentioned it to her, the wife of the family started telling me that her daughter had made her so mad the night before by suddenly remembering at midnight that she had a project due for school the next day that she had not started, or nor did she have the materials for. Fuming, she got herself dressed again and went to head out to Walmart to get some supplies to bail her daughter out of failing this project. As she started to get in the car, she saw somebody walking along the road out past her house. As she was already mad and generally has no filter anyway, she hollered out, "Can I help you with something?" And when he turned around to look at her, she said her heart sank. She said he may have been some kind of tweaker or strung out on drugs or something, but his face was pale and his eyes were sunken in and his appearance was disheveled and generally alarming. He looked back at her for a moment, then turned around and continued walking without a word. She got in her car to head out on the road to Walmart, thinking she'd pass him and get a better look at him on the way. As she rounded the bend just past our houses, she realized that was gone. There was literally nothing between our houses and the next houses except for woods for at least a mile, meaning he almost certainly disappeared into the woods. While we never saw him again or had any further disturbances for the rest of our residency there, I cannot shake the feeling that he must be watching us. I can still hear the pounding like it was yesterday. Was this guy living in the woods? Was he looking for someone who used to live there that he did drugs with? Did he need help? I guess we'll never know. So the final part of this story happened in 2008. I met my first serious boyfriend when I was 15 in secondary school, 2005. We ended up being together for about 2.5 years. We were in the same year, myself being only 3 months older than him. We clicked with each other's friend groups, so everybody tended to hang out with no issues. A few months into the relationship, some small red flags started to appear. Another guy tried talking to me, which my boyfriend threatened him. This landed him in detention as it happened during school time. This was the first of many times I saw a very scary side of him. Other occurrences that weren't massive, but in hindsight really were him smashing his bedroom window because I didn't want to go out and get drunk one night, and him throwing drinks over me, and when he started to reveal his ugly side even more, he pinned me against the wall because one of his friends sat next to me on a sofa at a party. Thankfully, his friends pulled him off me and gave him a bit of a talking to, but it was put down to just too much drinking and forgotten about. So time goes by and we briefly split up because he was taking a lot of drugs, mainly ecstasy and speed. I didn't really want to be doing all that, meaning we spent a lot of less free time together, so I called it a day. We were apart for a month before getting back together, in which time I had been casually chatting with someone else, which didn't go anywhere. One morning when we were still in bed, he had a text from a local friend and went out to meet them, leaving me in bed at his house. His mom, stepdad, and sister were out, so after about 5 minutes, I got up and went to use the bathroom, when I heard his car screech to a halt outside. I could hear his front door fling open and smash the wall and him pounding up the stairs. I could hear him breathing very heavily, like he was almost growling. The bathroom door was locked. It was a wooden one, so it didn't take him much time to smash it through. He screamed at me about how I had been talking to someone while we were split up, and how could I, despite the fact he was hooking up with someone else in his friend circle. I explained it was only texting and that we were split up, but that fell on deaf ears. He went on to rip my vest top strap and rip my boots up. Ugg boot type things that went up to the knee, and then told me to get out and walk home, which was at least 5 miles away. I live in the UK, in a very quiet area. There tends to be a small village, then like a mile stretch of quiet road, then another village, then a mile stretch of road, and so on. So I'm walking back on the first part of a quiet road, with my top hanging off of me and my boots flipping all over the place as they've been ripped when I hear his car. He had a Saxo VTR with a telltale shitty loud exhaust. There was no way I was dealing with him again, so I jumped over a hedge and hid. I remember getting scratched up from the brambles, but I didn't care. I just crouched behind this hedge, hoping he'd just disappear. I heard his car drive up and down that road a few times before he gave in, and I figured it was safe. I ignored all of his calls and luckily made it home safe, running most of the way. I received messages from him apologizing and telling me how he was about to lose his shit, but I just didn't care at that point. At some time, a while later, he finally left me alone, and I just concentrated on college and spending time with friends. I really wish that was the end of my interactions with him, but it just wasn't. I was on a night out in the local town with my friends. I had put my ex to the back of my mind as it had been months now without hearing anything or seeing him. There I was minding my own business, dancing away, when he just appeared out of nowhere. He tries to talk, which I acknowledge, but I'm not really in the mood for it, so I go to the toilets near the exit and decide how to handle this. One of my friends was working at the local Asda that night, and I knew they finished in about an hour, so I decided that I'd leave the club and walk to Asda and wait for them to get off. I knew it'd only take about 15 to 20 minutes to get there. In hindsight, this was a horrible idea, but I just wanted to get away from him. I peer out of the toilet, and although it's busy, I can't see him. So far, so good. I quickly run to the cloakroom and hand him my ticket to get my coat back, shove it on, and get out the door. There were people outside smoking and just hovering about chatting. I glanced around as I walked through and didn't see him, so I figured it was fine for me to dash off. About 10 minutes into my walk, I start to feel uneasy. I don't know why, I'm just full of dread. I turn around and about 30 feet behind me is my ex, following me, eyes locked onto me, not saying a word. He looks evil. He must have been waiting for me to come out of the toilets or clocked me getting my coat and kept a distance behind me the whole time. So it's past 12 a.m., the roads are dead because of the time, and there are no nearby houses. I realize in this moment just how badly I screwed up. I text my friend quickly, telling her what's happening, where I am and where I'm going. She tries to call, but I cancel it as I don't want him knowing I've alerted people to whatever the situation is going to turn into. I pick up the pace and can hear that he does too. Ahead of me, like a freaking horror movie, is the underground pass. It's a walkway that goes under the main road and brings you out to the Asda car park. I had to either run through this 100-yard dimly lit tunnel or turn around and face him. I decided screw it and sprinted through the tunnel. After all, Asda was open on the other side. There would for sure be somebody in the car park. They had a 24-hour petrol station, a cash point, etc., which many people use. So I bolt through. This is when he starts shouting abuse words at me. You effing this or that, the usual. I get through the tunnel and I'm so relieved to finally see Asda all lit up, knowing that people are inside. I notice a youngish guy on a moped not too far from the entrance. I let my guard down, figuring that I'd be left alone. Now someone else is visible, but I was wrong. The next thing I know, I'm being grabbed by my hair. He takes my phone out of my hand and smashes it on the floor. I start shouting and the moped guy sees us and legs it into the store. Great. So the crazy ex here starts pulling me backwards towards the underpass and I start noping and panicking real hard. If he gets me in that underpass, I'm screwed. So with all my might, I swung up and punched him as hard as I could in the face. It was then I remembered he still had a hold of my hair as he ripped a clump of it out. He grabs me again, picking me up by the throat, only to throw me to the floor, cutting up my knees and hands. Now he's screaming, calling me all kinds of names for hitting him. At this point, I start to hear shouting, and to my relief, it's getting closer. The guy on the moped had alerted staff to the situation outside, and a variety of people were running out towards us. A security guard, staff members, and even a customer. My ex started to run but was caught. The staff in Asda had rung the police, who were on their way. I saw my friend and just collapsed into her arms like a baby. The police were there about 5 minutes later, and they arrested him and took me to the station to make a statement. They had to take photos of all my injuries, all inflicted by somebody I once loved. Bruises, grazes, cuts, a patch of missing hair. I felt embarrassed and ashamed. I remember the police officer trying to lighten my mood by joking about me managing to punch me at least. What happened after was all a blur. I shut myself away and developed bad anxiety and panic attacks due to everything that happened. I remember an officer visiting me telling me about a court date. I didn't attend. In hindsight, I should have, but I couldn't face him and those evil eyes. I didn't want him to remember the fear I felt looking at him. I just wanted it all to go away. It was in the local paper that week, details of his court date, etc. I was told that he'd been put in an anger management program and had started counseling. He was forced to face what he was, which I'm glad of, as he is a monster. Even though I haven't seen him, I hope to never again. I'm 26 and I went to see a late showing by myself on a weeknight because I do that sometimes, and it had never once been an issue. The theater was almost empty. A Tuesday night, 9:30 showing. Maybe 8 other people were scattered across the whole room when I walked in. I picked a seat in the middle section toward the back, got comfortable, put my back on the seat next to me, and pulled out my drink. A man sat down directly next to me. Not one seat over, right next to me. In a theater with maybe 8 people in it and every other row completely empty. I looked over at him. He was older, maybe 50. He didn't look at me, just stared at the screen like it was the most natural thing in the world to sit shoulder to shoulder with a stranger in an empty theater. I moved one seat to my left without saying anything. Then he did as well. My stomach dropped. I looked at him again and he was still staring straight ahead. I picked up my bag and moved 3 seats further down the row. He stayed where he was this time, and I told myself it was a coincidence that he just had a preferred spot and I kept landing in it. The preview started, and I put my attention on the screen and tried to let it go. But about 10 to 15 minutes into the movie, he appeared at the end of my row and worked his way toward me again. Sat down 2 seats away this time. I could feel him looking at me in my peripheral vision, even though I kept my eyes fixated on the screen. He leaned slightly toward me and said I looked familiar. I said nothing. He said he was sure he'd seen me somewhere else. Said it again in a different way. Said maybe we had a mutual friend. I turned and looked at him directly and told him I didn't know him and asked him to please leave me alone. He smiled, not embarrassed one bit and not apologetic. Just smiled like I'd said something that pleased him and sat back in the seat. I got my phone out and typed a text to my friend telling her where I was and what was happening. She replied immediately and said to go get a staff member. I knew she was right, but something about getting up and walking past him in the dark to get to the aisle felt worse than staying put. He leaned in again about 5 minutes later, told me I had a really nice profile. Said it quietly, and close enough that I could hear him clearly over the movie. I got up and walked to the aisle and went straight to the lobby. The girl at the concession stand was maybe 19, and she listened to me and got her manager within 2 minutes. The manager was a guy in his 30s who took it seriously immediately and walked back into the theater with me. But the man was gone. His seat was empty. I looked around the theater and couldn't see him anywhere in the dark. The manager walked the whole room and came back and said he wasn't in there. I asked if I could be moved to a different screening room or get a refund and leave. The manager gave me a full refund without any argument and walked me to my car himself, which I was grateful for. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a few minutes before driving home. Checked the back seat twice before getting in, which I had never done before in my life. The thing that bothered me the most, and still does, is how calculated it all felt. The way he moved when I moved, and the way he smiled when I told him to leave me alone. There was no embarrassment. No fumbling, no sense that he thought he was doing anything wrong or cared. It felt practiced in a way that made my skin crawl because practice means it hadn't been the first time. I still go to movies alone, and I refuse to stop doing something I enjoy because of one person, but I always sit at the end of the row now, and I always make sure I know exactly where the exits are before the lights go down. This happened a couple of years ago. 26 female. I lived in the suburb of a big city and was visiting my boyfriend's office at the time. When we pulled into the small lot, there was a young man who appeared to be 16 to 27 years old, with a small backpack and penny board, standing under the shade outside. Since it was a fairly small complex, you didn't see new people often. We caught eyes, and something about his gaze was unsettling, but my boyfriend and I continued walking into his office. We talked about it briefly when we got in, and he said maybe he was avoiding the sun and made light of it. And then we left back out to get coffee. When we came back about 15 to 20 minutes later, I wholeheartedly expected him to be gone because when we pulled up, I didn't see him. Honestly, I was very relieved. However, when I walked through the front door, there he was again. This time I sort of crouched and hid behind what was the front door of the office, a fully see-through plexiglass door. So it was understandably an odd place to hide behind, because anybody passing by could see him, and when I rediscovered him, I screamed and sort of visibly jumped because I have trauma, and to be honest, he scared me. Something about his face when I screamed really creeped me out, and it felt like he wanted to scare me, or someone who passed by on purpose, almost like a twinkle in his eye. I started to get really creeped out by now, but I wasn't fully convinced it was all in my head. Because my boyfriend was minimizing it, I decided to test a theory. I was also deadly hungover, so don't judge my critical thinking here. When my boyfriend and I got back to his office, I knew I'd have to pee because I have a small bladder, I guess. I knew, unfortunately, the crazy guy who saw me go with him to his office would see because the hallway isn't that long. If he were really crazy, he'd definitely follow me and my boyfriend would see it, and that would be the end of it. Or so I thought. Plus, I always have to pee anyway, so there was really no other option. So I let my boyfriend know I had to go to the bathroom. I tell him to keep the office door open and keep an eye out. I explain my concern, and then I run to the bathroom. As soon as I get into the bathroom and bolt the lock and plop onto the toilet, I get the weirdest sinking feeling I've ever felt to this day. I suddenly just know that when I finish using the bathroom, I will have to run out of this restroom for my life. I have no idea how I know this, but I just know. I also have a secondary thought as I'm finishing up that I'm going to have to call the police on this man afterwards, and I don't know why because I literally haven't heard anything outside the door. But I can feel 1, run to safety, and then 2, call 911. So I mentally prep. I take some deep breaths, and then I swing the door open, and he is right there. I scream bloody murder to the point I think I scared him because he jumped back and I book it. The look in his eyes when I first opened the door pre-scream, however, told me he was planning to push me back into the restroom and then lock the door. If I hadn't been paying attention, I think that's what his plan was. Obviously I can't be sure, but I don't know. I've been assaulted before, and there's a certain look those kinds of people get in their eyes. Their eyes turn all black and stuff. I run and run and run, all the while screaming to my boyfriend's office and swing the door closed and lock it and tell him to call 911. He doesn't believe me, and neither do the officers until they finally arrive and they see the man is still hunched behind the glass door at the front. He didn't even try to leave the scene, just stayed there waiting. The police said he had a warrant for his arrest, specifically for something sexual assault related, so they take him away. I'm 18 and I moved into my first apartment alone in June right after graduating, and honestly the freedom of it still hasn't worn off yet. The complex was decent for the price. 3 floors, outdoor pool in the center courtyard, maybe 40 units total. Quiet mostly. Older residents on the upper floors and a few people around my age on the ground level where I was. I spent a lot of that first summer at the pool because I had a part-time job that ended at noon and nothing else demanding my time. I noticed the woman a few days after I moved in. She was maybe 40, lived somewhere on the second floor I think, and was at the pool almost every time I was. That alone meant nothing. Lots of people used the pool, but she had this habit of positioning her chair to face wherever I was sitting and watching me in a way that was hard to ignore after a while. Not glancing, watching. The kind of sustained eye contact that you keep expecting to break and it just doesn't. I told myself I was imagining it the first few times, but then she started talking to me. Small stuff really at first. Asking if the water was cold or commenting on the weather. Normal pool conversation. But it escalated fast in a way that felt wrong. By the 3rd or 4th interaction, she was asking me personal questions. Where did I work? Did I have a girlfriend? Was I close with my family? And did I live alone? I answered very vaguely and tried to keep things short, but she was persistent in a way that made short answers feel rude without actually stopping anything. One afternoon, I decided to head back to my apartment earlier than planned. I gathered my stuff and said a generic goodbye and walked across the courtyard to the ground floor entrance. I went inside and down the hall to my unit and got my key out. I heard the door at the end of the hall open behind me. I looked back. She was walking down the hall toward me. I had not seen her leave the pool. I had been at the pool 1 minute and walking into my building the next, and somehow she was already behind me in my hallway. I turned back to my door and then got the key in and opened it fast. She called my name from halfway down the hall, asked if I wanted company. I went inside and locked the door and stood in my entryway, not moving. She knocked about 10 seconds later. 2 lights, then quiet, then 2 more. I stood there and didn't make a sound. After about a minute, I heard her footsteps move back down the hall, and the door at the end opened and closed. I went straight to the leasing office the next morning and told them everything. The woman at the desk knew exactly who I was describing before I even finished. Apparently, I was not the first person to come in about her. They handled it through whatever process they had, and I never got the full details, but the woman moved out about 3 weeks later. I still think about how she was already in that hallway behind me. I had maybe a 30-second head start from the pool, and she covered it fast enough that I had no idea she'd followed me until I was already at my door with the key out. 30 more seconds, and I would have been inside with the door closed and never known she was there at all. I'm 79 years old, and I have lived in the same house my whole life. Built it myself and my brother back in 1974. On the same land my father farmed before us. Know every board and nail in it. My wife passed away 6 years ago, and my kids have been after me, moved closer to them ever since, but I won't do it. This is my home, and I intend to die in it on my own terms. What happened just last spring almost made that happen sooner than I planned. I'd been in bed maybe an hour when I heard the first sound, glass breaking somewhere at the back of the house. I sat up in the dark and listened and heard voices outside. Low and male, definitely more than one. Then the back door came open. I want to explain the room before I go further because it matters. When I built this house, I put a small storage space behind the back wall of the master closet. My brother thought I was being paranoid, but I'd grown up hearing stories from my father about hard times, and I wanted a place where valuables could be kept that wasn't obvious. It wasn't a full room, maybe 6 feet deep and 4 wide. Accessed through a panel in the closet wall that looked like shelving from the outside. I kept my important documents in there, some cash and a few things of my wife's I didn't want disturbed. Over the years, I'd half forgotten about it, but I always kept that panel functional. I got there fast for a man my age, down the hall and into the closet and through the panel and pulled it shut behind me and sat down on the floor in the dark. There were at least 3 of them from what I could tell by the voices. Young, loud once they got comfortable, clearly not expecting anybody to be here. I found out later my truck had been in the shop 2 days and my driveway was empty, which I suppose is why they picked my house. They went through everything. I could hear them moving from room to room, opening drawers and pulling things off shelves. Heard the television get unhooked from the wall and heard cabinets in the kitchen banging open and shut. At some point, one of them found my liquor cabinet because the voices got louder and looser, and after a while I could hear music playing from somewhere in the house. Tinny and small like from a phone speaker. They settled it. That was the part I hadn't anticipated. I expected them to take what they wanted and leave, but they stayed. Laughing, talking, moving around. At one point it sounded like they were cooking something in the kitchen. I sat on that floor in the dark for what I later figured was close to 3 hours. My phone was on my nightstand. I had not grabbed it on my way to the closet. That was my mistake and I knew it. Sitting there in the dark with my back against the wall and my knees aching and nothing to do but listen to strangers make themselves at home in the house I built with my own hands. At some point the talking got quieter and slower. I thought maybe they were leaving, but the sounds that followed were the sounds of people settling down to sleep, and I understood they were planning to stay the night. I made a decision. The panel opened inward, quietly if you were careful about it. I had oiled those hinges myself not 2 years ago during a cleaning out, and they moved without sound. I opened it just enough to get through and stepped in the closet and stood there in the dark listening. The house had gone mostly quiet. One voice somewhere toward the front of the house, low and mumbly like somebody half asleep. I moved through the closet and into the bedroom and found my phone on the nightstand and went back into the storage space and pulled the panel shut again. I called 911 and whispered everything I could. My address, how many I thought there were, and that they were armed for all I knew. The dispatcher kept her voice low to match mine, which I appreciated. She said units were on the way and told me to stay where I was and to stay on the line. I heard the sirens maybe 15 minutes later. Heard the voices in the house change fast. That sudden shift from loose and comfortable to panicked. I heard feet on the floor moving fast and the back door banging open. 2 of them ran and were caught within a few blocks. A third had passed out on my couch and woke up to an officer standing over him. They were all in their early 20s. Local. A couple of them had records already. Took my television, a jar of cash I kept in the kitchen, and my wife's good jewelry from the bedroom dresser, which was the part that hurt most. Most of it came back eventually. The jewelry they'd already sold, but the detective tracking it down got it returned to me over the following months piece by piece, which I hadn't expected. My daughter drove up from Birmingham the next day and sat with me and cried more than I did. Kept saying I should have had a way to call for help faster. Should have had a plan. I told her I did have a plan, and I told her it worked. She didn't find that reassuring as I meant it. I still sleep in that house. Still wake up some nights and lie there listening to every sound the way I didn't used to. The back door has 3 locks on it now and a bar across it besides. But I'm still here. That's the part that matters. This is something that happened to me as a toddler. It's not as crazy as some of the stories here, but here it goes. My family told me about this a few years ago. I was too young to really remember much, but there are some parts of the story I distinctly remember. Anyways, I had a nanny who took care of me. My mom's pregnancy took a toll on her and she became really sick, so she had to get treatment abroad while my first year, was with my dad, sister, and nanny. When she came back, the same nanny was taking care of me. She stayed with us for a few years up until I was in preschool. She and I were very close. I can remember her distinctly, and there are even images in our photo book of me and her. My mom says that I would not refer to her Mom as my mother, and I stay away from her to be with my nanny. Also, my mom's illness made her emotionally really weak at the time, so apparently the nanny would tell me to ignore my mom, and she wouldn't let my sister be around me. Also, I live in a country where labor is cheap, and having stay-in or full-time helpers is quite common. Anyway, I just remember being attached to her constantly. She kept treating my mom and sister really bad, but they did not have the heart to fire her because of how attached I was. However, my uncle and his family were in town visiting us, and he got so mad at the way she treated my mom that he fired her on the spot and made her leave the house. I remember crying my eyes out and running after the nanny to the lift of our apartment. My cousins had to pull me back. It was that bad. So the crazy part is that after, my parents found a lemon with pins stuck in it and a phrase written in her native language on this piece of parchment paper in some room at our house. Anyway, we basically found out that she had been going to a shaman, dark magic priest or something, and casting spells like those. So I would forget who my mom was and think the nanny was my mom, in order to kidnap me and keep me as her own. Before you think I'm lying, yeah, this is one of those made-up posts that we see so often here. I live in an Asian country that has a large dark magic culture. It's really covert, but everybody knows about it. It's scary to think that if my uncle wasn't there, she'd probably have taken me away since she lived at home and slept in my room, and I would have been raised in a completely different way. I feel bad because she probably felt like I was her son, but yeah, this was definitely not the way to go. I have a very close extended family, as in a huge family that all lives within 30 minutes of each other. We all live in the suburbs of a large city, far enough away that it is generally considered a safe area with neighbors all knowing each other and car doors left unlocked in the driveway. When I was young, my grandma used to watch my cousin and me, same age, and she had 2 dogs. Dog 1 was Benji, a sweet, lovable dog. Dog 2 was Cheyenne. She was nice enough, but we always preferred Benji as he was nicer, more playful, and just generally wanted to be around us more. We'd always play in the backyard with each other, sometimes with supervision, sometimes not. It was a fenced-in yard and, like I said, a nice enough area. Nothing weird here. Anyway, one day we're playing outside as per usual. Benji is inside with Grandma. Cheyenne was outside, but just lying away from us as we played with our cars or whatever we were messing with that day. We didn't notice until he started talking, but once he spoke, we noticed an older man, maybe 50-something, trying to talk to us through the fence, no more than 20 feet away. He seemed nice enough, but hey, I was young so I had no clue. Kind of walk over to him, but not very close. Maybe 6 feet from the fence. He's talking to us about who knows what. This whole time, Cheyenne had started coming over by us and growling lowly. We didn't think much of it and kept talking. I can't remember what the subject of conversation was. All I know is at one point he began to try and call us over to him, to which we wouldn't. We knew that much at least. He was getting upset. At this point, he started to climb the fence. I've never been so afraid of a dog in my life. Cheyenne starts going absolutely berserk. As in, if he had gotten over the fence, I don't think Cheyenne would have let him leave the yard alive. He jumps back. My grandma hears this happening, so he rushes out to the yard and sees the guy, us, and the dog going insane. She starts screaming like I had never seen her scream before as he runs away and down the road. We ended up being rushed inside where my grandma sat us down very nicely and explained the stranger danger thing again. My grandma had no idea who it was, not a neighbor. The whole time the rest of the day, Cheyenne would not leave our sides. I was always a little scared of Cheyenne after that. I know now it wasn't fair to her. She was protecting us. After that, I learned I will always trust my dogs. We've had dogs as long as I can remember, and I will trust any of them over any person every time. I have no idea what he was planning on doing if he got in the yard and Cheyenne hadn't been there.